My name is Valerie Edwards, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I would be standing in my kitchen holding legal papers served by my own parents. After working 60-hour weeks for years to afford my downtown Chicago apartment, they expected me to sell it to fund my sister Brittany's message divorce. I had always been the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble, while Brittany remained the golden child despite her chaos. Before I tell you how I stood up to my family after years of being their doormat, let me know where you are watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to fight for what is rightfully yours. Growing up in suburban Illinois, my childhood memories are filled with moments of being the overlooked older sister from the time Brittany was born. When I was 3, there was a clear shift in my parents' attention. Family photos told the story clearly. Brittany front and center, with mom and dad beaming proudly, while I stood slightly off to the side, often half out of frame. It was not that they were deliberately cruel, they just made it abundantly clear who the favorite was. Valerie, you need to set a good example, became the soundtrack of my youth, when Brittany broke my science project the night before it was due. I had to understand that she is just curious, when she borrowed my clothes without asking and returned them stained. I needed to be more generous with my things. The pattern was established early. Brittany acted however she pleased, and I was expected to accommodate. High school graduation marked a turning point. While my friends' parents threw elaborate parties and gifted them cars or vacation trips, my parents gave me a card with $20 inside. "We are saving for Brittany's dance competition," they explained. Meanwhile, they had already started a college fund for her while informing me that I would need to figure out my own path since I was so independent. College was a struggle from day one. I attended State University, not my dream school, but the one offering the best financial aid package. Even then, I worked 3 jobs mornings at the campus coffee shop evenings, waiting tables and weekends doing data entry for the business department. Some nights I got only 4 hours of sleep before starting the cycle again. My roommate Jessica often found me asleep on my textbooks. "Your parents do not help you at all," she asked incredulously one day. "They believe in self-sufficiency," I replied, the rehearsed line falling flat even to my own ears. Meanwhile, Brittany attended an expensive private university, complete with a meal plan housing and a monthly allowance. During holiday breaks, she would regale the family with stories of sorority parties and spring break trips, while I sat quietly too exhausted to contribute much to the conversation. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a financial firm in Chicago. The starting salary was modest, but I had a plan. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with secondhand furniture, brought lunch from home every day, and tracked every penny spent. My coworkers thought I was antisocial when I declined happy hours and team dinners. But I had a goal: home ownership. For 5 years, I saved aggressively. No vacations, no new clothes, unless absolutely necessary. No frivolous spending of any kind. At 28, I had enough for a down payment on a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent Chicago neighborhood. The day I signed those papers was the first time I truly felt proud of myself. No one had helped me. This achievement was mine alone. The apartment needed work when I bought it. Outdated kitchen-worn carpet bathroom straight out of the 1980s. But over the next 2 years, I slowly transformed it. I learned to tile from YouTube videos, painted every wall myself, and scoured clearance sales for quality fixtures. Each improvement represented countless extra hours worked and simple pleasures denied. This place was more than property. It was physical proof of my determination. Throughout these years, Brittany's life followed a different trajectory. After college, she drifted between jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months. The work environment was toxic, or my boss was hitting on me, or they did not appreciate my talents, were her standard explanations. My parents always nodded sympathetically, opening their wallets in their spare bedroom whenever necessary. When Brittany met Kevin Thompson at 26, it seemed like her ship had finally come in. Kevin was 34, established in his career as an investment banker, and came from family money. Their whirlwind romance led to an engagement after just 4 months. And a lavish wedding my parents drained their retirement accounts to provide. I contributed what I could and served as maid of honor, genuinely hoping this would be Brittany's turning point. "He is loaded," Brittany whispered to me during the reception, champagne sloshing over the rim of her glass. I am set for life. Something about her tone made me uncomfortable, but I pushed the feeling aside. Family gatherings became more tolerable after Brittany married, with her seemingly settled. My parents occasionally showed interest in my life and career progress. I maintained careful boundaries, limiting visits and phone calls to protect my hard-won peace. When I did see them, I kept conversation light and redirected personal questions. It was not perfect, but it was manageable. Then came the phone call that would upend everything. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had just returned from work. "Valerie, it is Mom. Brittany is having some marital difficulties. We are having a family dinner on Saturday to discuss it. You need to be there." The tone left no room for questions or refusal. Little did I know this dinner would be the first domino in a series of events that would force me to redefine my relationship with my entire family. Saturday arrived, and I pulled up to my parents' house with a sense of dread settling in my stomach. Family dinners were rarely pleasant affairs, but something about this one felt particularly ominous. I brought a bottle of wine as a peace offering, though I suspected we would need something stronger by the end of the night. The scene inside was tense. My father Robert sat stoically at the head of the table, while my mother Martha bustled around the kitchen with nervous energy. Brittany was nowhere to be seen. "Where's the woman of the hour?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light in the guest room. "She is having a difficult time." My mother replied, her voice dropping to a whisper, as though Brittany might overhear from upstairs. "Do not bring up Kevin unless she does." Dinner was a silent affair until the main course arrived just as my mother served the roast. Brittany made her entrance. I nearly dropped my fork. My normally immaculately groomed sister looked disheveled. Her designer clothes had been replaced by sweatpants. Her hair was unwashed, and her eyes were rimmed with red. "Nice of you to finally join us, Val," she said with unexpected bitterness. Before I could respond, my father cleared his throat. "We might as well get to the point. Brittany and Kevin are getting divorced." I expressed appropriate sympathy while mentally calculating that they had been married less than 3 years. "I am sorry to hear that." "What happened?" The question triggered an immediate reaction. My mother gasped as if I had said something obscene. My father's face darkened, and Brittany burst into dramatic sobs. "Kevin is being completely unreasonable," my mother said, rushing to console Brittany. "He is trying to leave her with nothing." Gradually, through a combination of accusations, tears, and grudging admissions, when I pressed for details, the real story emerged. Brittany had been having an affair with Kevin's friend, not just a one-time mistake, but a 6-month relationship conducted partly in the home Kevin had bought them. When Kevin discovered the infidelity, he immediately filed for divorce. "But the prenup," Brittany wailed, "has a fidelity clause. He says I get nothing because I cheated." "Surely you get something," I said. "The law usually provides for some division of assets acquired during marriage." "That is the problem," my father interjected. "Kevin's lawyers are good. The prenup is ironclad. She might get a small settlement, but nothing like what she deserves. After putting up with him for 3 years. I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out that from what I had seen, Kevin had been nothing but generous and patient with Brittany. Instead, I asked the obvious question, "But things. So what happens now?" My parents exchanged a look I recognized from childhood. It was the same look they had given each other before explaining why my college fund had been spent on Brittany's Sweet 16 party. "Brittany needs to fight this," my mother said. "She needs a good lawyer, the best, someone who can find loopholes in that horrible prenup. And those lawyers cost money." My father added, "Money we do not have right now." The conversation paused as my mother served dessert. "No one touched it. We have been thinking." My mother continued, her voice taking on a wheedling quality, "about your apartment." "My apartment?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "It has appreciated quite a bit since you bought it, has not it?" my father asked. With all those renovations and the neighborhood improving, a cold feelings spread through my chest as I began to understand where this was heading. "We thought," my mother said, leaning forward, "that you could sell it. Use the equity to help Brittany with her legal fees. You can always move back into a rental for a while." The silence that followed was deafening. They were actually serious. They expected me to sell my home, the result of nearly a decade of sacrifice and hard work to fund Brittany's divorce. After she cheated on her husband. That is not going to happen. I said finally, my voice steady, despite the rage building inside me. Now. Valerie. My father began in his lecture. Tone. Family helps family. When one of us is in trouble, we all pitch in. When have any of you ever pitched in for me? The question escaped before I could stop it. My mother looked wounded. We raised you, put a roof over your head, food on the table, the basic legal requirements of parenthood, I countered. I worked my way through college while you paid Brittany's full ride. I saved for years while living in a place with roof leaks and no air conditioning to afford that apartment. Every improvement came from my sweat and sacrifice. It is just an apartment. Brittany suddenly interjected. You can get another one later. This is my life we are talking about, and the apartment is my life, I responded. It represents everything I have worked for. I am not selling it. My father's face reddened. We are not asking for charity. You could consider it a loan. I nearly laughed alone when his Brittany ever paid back anything. Remember when she borrowed $4,000 for that deposit on her rental after college? Or the car you co-signed for that got repossessed? That is unfair. My mother protested. No, what is unfair is expecting me to dismantle my life because Brittany cheated on her husband and is facing the consequences. I suggested alternatives. My parents could take out a home equity loan. Brittany could get a job and pay her lawyer in installments, or she could accept a smaller settlement and move on with her life. Each suggestion was immediately shot down. We are already mortgaged to the limit. After paying for the wedding, my father admitted, no lawyer will work on a payment plan for a case like this. My mother insisted I deserve half of everything Kevin has, Brittany declared, as though stating an obvious fact. The conversation circled for another hour, becoming increasingly heated. My parents cycled through guilt appeals to family loyalty, and finally, outright emotional manipulation. After everything we have done for you, my mother said tearfully. If you had any decency, my father added. I always knew you were jealous of me, Brittany spat. Finally, I stood up. I am leaving. My answer is no. I will not sell my apartment. I am happy to help Brittany update her resume or drive her to job interviews, but I will not dismantle my financial security for this. As I reached the door, my father called after me. This is not over, Valerie. One way or another, you will do the right thing for your sister. Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine, but I walked out without looking back. Driving home, I tried to convince myself that they would eventually see reason, that this outlandish request would be forgotten once they had time to think it through. I was wrong. So very wrong. The next few weeks brought an onslaught I was utterly unprepared for. It began with phone calls multiple times a day from both parents and Brittany. When I stopped answering, they started texting. The messages ranged from guilt-inducing, how can you sleep at night knowing your sister is suffering, to threatening, you will regret turning your back on this family. I blocked their numbers, hoping for peace. Instead, the campaign expanded. Aunts, uncles, and cousins. I barely spoke to begin reaching out, all with the same message I needed to step up and do. Right by Brittany. It became clear my parents were spreading their version of events throughout the extended family. Your mother is beside herself, said Aunt Patricia, who had not contacted me in 3 years. Not even for my 30th birthday. How can you be so selfish? Because I will not sell my home to fund Brittany's divorce after she cheated on her husband, I asked. That is not the point, and Patricia replied, confirming that my parents were omitting key details in their narrative. The situation escalated when I received a notification from my bank about an attempted access to my accounts. Someone had tried to log in using my old password, triggering the security system. When I called the bank to investigate, they confirmed the attempt came from an IP address matching my parents' home. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had tried to access my financial information without my permission. Had they succeeded? What would they have done? Transferred money, checked my balances to calculate how much they could pressure me for the violation. Left me feeling sick and vulnerable before I could fully process this betrayal. Brittany took things to another level. I was in a client meeting when my assistant interrupted with an urgent message. There is a woman in reception causing a scene, she whispered. Says she is your sister and needs to see you immediately. I excused myself and rushed to the lobby to find Brittany yelling at the receptionist. She was dressed inappropriately for a financial office, her voice carrying through the entire floor as she demanded to see me. Clients and colleagues stared openly. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, mortified. As I pulled her toward the exit, "Since you are ignoring everyone, I thought I would see for myself how your precious career is going while my life falls apart," she snapped. "You need to leave now, not until you agree to help me. Kevin's lawyers are pushing for a quick settlement. I have nothing, Valerie. Nothing. You have an entire apartment. You could sell. Lower your voice." I pleaded, acutely aware of the audience we had attracted. "This is my workplace. I do not care. You clearly do not care about me. So why should I care about your job?" Security arrived, summoned by the receptionist as they escorted Brittany out. She shouted accusations and insults loud enough for everyone to hear. I returned to my meeting, hands shaking, to find my clients exchanging uncomfortable glances. "Family emergency," I explained weakly. "Shall we continue?" The meeting proceeded, but the damage was done. My professional reputation, built on competence and composure, had been publicly challenged. Later that afternoon, my boss, Gregory, called me into his office. "Everything all right, Valerie?" That was quite a scene earlier. I considered brushing it off, but found myself unexpectedly confessing the whole situation. Gregory listened attentively, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "This is harassment," he said. Finally, "Have you considered speaking to a lawyer?" The suggestion surprised me. In my mind, this was an ugly family dispute, not a legal matter, but Gregory's perspective forced me to acknowledge how far things had gone. My sleep was disrupted. My work was suffering, and I felt constantly on edge, jumping whenever my phone rang. That evening, I called my friend Zoe, the only person I felt I could truly confide in. We met at a quiet bar far from my office, an apartment somewhere my family would not think to look for me. "You look terrible," Zoe said bluntly as I slid into the booth. "Thanks," I replied dryly, accepting the glass of wine. She pushed toward me. "I mean it, Val. You have lost weight. There are circles under your eyes. This is taking a serious toll on you." I summarized the situation, including the latest developments. Zoe listened without interrupting her expression, darkening with each new detail. "This is not normal family pressure," she said. "When I finished, they are terrorizing you. The bank account thing crosses a major line and showing up at your workplace. That is deliberate sabotage. I keep thinking if I just hold firm, they will eventually give up and move on." Zoe shook her head. "People who violate boundaries do not suddenly develop respect for them. Your family has never respected your autonomy. Why would they start now?" Her words struck a chord. Throughout my life, I had been expected to bend to my family's will, particularly when it came to Brittany's needs and wants. Standing firm now represented a fundamental shift in our dynamic, one they were clearly unwilling to accept. "I think you need to consider legal options," Zoe suggested, echoing Gregory's advice. "At minimum, a cease and desist letter for the harassment." I nodded, beginning to accept that this situation required more than just personal resolve. I needed protection professionally and maybe legally. The following week, I attempted one last mediation effort. I invited my parents to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, hoping that a public setting might encourage civilized behavior. They arrived looking grim but composed. "I want to clear the air," I began. "I understand you are worried about Brittany, but the way you have been pressuring me is unacceptable." "We would not need to pressure you if you would simply do the right thing," my father replied. "Selling my home is not the right thing, not for me." "Always about you," my mother muttered. "Yes, when it comes to my property and financial security. It is about me," I insisted. "I am willing to help Brittany in other ways. I can help her find a job offer, emotional support, even let her stay with me temporarily if needed. But I will not sell my apartment." My parents exchanged a look I could not interpret. "We had hoped you would be reasonable," my father said finally. "But you leave us no choice." "What does that mean?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "You will see," my mother replied ominously. 3 days later, I understood what they meant. I returned home from work to find a courier waiting at my door with legal papers. My parents were suing me. The complaint alleged that I had verbally agreed to provide financial support for Brittany's divorce proceedings, specifically by selling my apartment and contributing the proceeds. They claimed to have witnesses to this agreement and were seeking to enforce it through the courts. I stood in my kitchen papers, trembling in my hands, utterly shocked. My own parents were suing me over a promise I had never made, but the true betrayal came when I read further into the filing as evidence. They had included excerpts from my childhood diary's private journals. I had kept at their house, in which I had written about wanting to always be there for my family and take care of them. These deeply personal writings, which I had believed safely stored in my old bedroom, were now being used against me in a court of law. The violation was complete. They had not only invaded my financial privacy and threatened my career, but they had also weaponized my most private thoughts in that moment. Something inside me broke. The daughter who had always sought approval, who had maintained contact despite years of favoritism and neglect, who had continued to hope for a healthy relationship with her family, ceased to exist. In her place stood someone new, someone who was finally ready to fight back. The lawsuit was the final straw. After reading through the legal documents 3 times, still unable to fully process the magnitude of my parents' betrayal, I collapsed onto my kitchen floor for the first time since childhood. I allowed myself to truly cry about my family. Not the quiet, controlled tears I had permitted over the years, but raw, guttural sobs that left me gasping for air. The pain of a lifetime of being secondary, of never being enough. Despite my achievements of being expected to sacrifice while Brittany took, finally broke through the careful walls I had built. I'm not sure at how long I sat there, but eventually the tears subsided, leaving me hollow, but somehow clearer. My phone had been buzzing incessantly texts from family members who had obviously been informed about the lawsuit. I ignored them all, except for a message from Gregory, my boss. "Heard what happened. Take tomorrow off. I have someone you should talk to." The next morning, I met Gregory for breakfast at a quiet diner near the office. He took one look at my face and ordered coffee for both of us without speaking. When the waitress left, he slid a business card across the table. "Elena Vasquez, best attorney. I know for family law and civil litigation. She does not take nonsense from anyone." I stared at the card. I cannot afford a top attorney. Not if I am keeping my apartment, which is the whole point. Gregory shook his head. "She owes me a favor. Big one. Initial consultation is on me, and she will work with you on the rest." "Why would you do this?" I asked, genuinely confused. In my experience, people did not offer help without expecting something in return. "Because what is happening to you is wrong," he said simply. "And because you are one of my best analysts, and I do not want to lose you to this mess." His straightforward kindness nearly brought me to tears again. I accepted the card with murmured thanks. Elena's office was intimidating, all glass and chrome in a high-rise overlooking the river. The woman herself was even more intimidating. Sharp-eyed, impeccably dressed, with a no-nonsense demeanor that made me sit up straighter. So she said after I had explained the situation, "Your parents are suing you to force the sale of your property based on a verbal agreement that never happened, using your childhood diaries as evidence of your general intention to support family." "Yes." She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That is about as legally sound as a sandcastle at high tide. So they do not have a case. They have less than no case. This would be thrown out in preliminary hearings." But she held up a finger. "That does not mean we should take it lightly. The fact that they went this far suggests they are either desperate or getting very bad advice. Possibly both. And desperate people can be unpredictable." Elena asked detailed questions about my property ownership, financial independence from my parents, and the recent harassment. As I answered, she took notes and occasionally nodded or frowned. "Have you checked your credit report recently?" she asked suddenly. "Number. Why just a precaution? People willing to access your bank accounts might try other financial avenues." That afternoon, I ran a credit check and discovered something disturbing. There were student loans in my name that I had never taken out, dating back to my college years. Loans I had been unknowingly paying interest on through automatic withdrawals described as edu loan services on my bank statements, which I had assumed were my legitimate student loans. Further investigation revealed that my parents had taken out these additional loans in my name without my knowledge or consent. Using my social security number and forged signatures, the money had never gone to my education. Based on the timing, it appeared to have funded family expenses and possibly some of Brittany's activities. When I called Elena with this discovery, her response was immediate. "That is fraud. Criminal fraud. We need to document everything." The hits kept coming while going through old financial records to document the fraud. I found emails from my parents to various family members, which had been mistakenly sent to a shared family email account. I rarely checked the emails painted me as ungrateful and selfish, claiming I had promised to sell my apartment for Brittany, but was now reneging. Out of jealousy, they had been systematically turning the extended family against me for weeks before the lawsuit was even filed. That night, my apartment security desk called to inform me that my parents had attempted to enter my building, claiming they needed to check on me because I was having a mental health crisis. Thankfully, the security guard followed protocol and refused them entry without my permission. When I checked my security camera footage installed after Brittany's workplace incident, I saw them lingering outside my building for nearly an hour before leaving. The next day, they returned with a spare key I did not know they possessed, only to discover I had changed the locks months earlier as part of my renovation. The security footage showed them clearly attempting to enter, then my father appearing to make notes or take pictures of items visible through my windows. They are trying to inventory my possessions. I realized with horror when I showed the footage to Elena, or established that you are not living there to strengthen their claim that you do not need the property, she suggested grimly. Either way, it is trespassing. The pressure was becoming unbearable. I took a week off work too anxious to leave my apartment for fear of what my family might do next. Zoe brought groceries and stayed with me for a few nights, concerned about my deteriorating mental state. You need to talk to them one more time. She advised not to reconcile, but to understand exactly what they think they are doing. Elena should have enough to start building your defense, but knowing their endgame might help. Reluctantly, I agreed with Zoe present in my apartment for support. I called my parents on speakerphone, recording the conversation with Elena's prior advice and approval. As Illinois is a two-party consent state, and I plan to inform them of the recording. I'm calling about the lawsuit, I said when they answered. I am recording this conversation for legal purposes. There was a pause, then my father's voice surprisingly calm. That is fine. We have nothing to hide. Why are you doing this? You have to know you cannot legally force me to sell my property. We know what we are doing, my mother replied. The judge will understand once we explain the situation. Explain what situation that Brittany cheated on her husband. And you want me to bail her out again? Do not be crude, my mother snapped. Family takes care of family. You have always been the responsible one. Brittany needs help now, and you have the means to provide it. So that is it. Because I have been responsible and worked hard, I deserve to lose my home, while Brittany faces no consequences for her actions. Brittany is different, my father said, his tone suggesting he was explaining something obvious. She was not built for struggle like you are. She needs more support. I was not built for struggle, I corrected him, my voice shaking with anger. I was forced into it by you, by your constant favoritism and failure to hold Brittany accountable. That is not true, my mother protested. We love you both equally. Number, you do not. You never have. And now you are trying to take the one thing I have built for myself, despite your neglect. There was a long silence. Then my father spoke, his voice cold and unfamiliar. We have always known it would come to this someday. Valerie, from the time you were small, too serious to independent, we knew eventually you would need to be the safety net for Brittany. That is your role in this family. It is time you accepted it. The words struck me like physical blows. All my life I had sensed this unspoken expectation, but hearing it stated so baldly was another level of betrayal. I will not accept that role, I said finally. Not anymore. Then you leave us no choice but to proceed with the lawsuit, my mother replied. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. You owe us this. After the call ended, I sat in stunned silence. Zoe put her arm around me. You heard that right, I asked. They literally see me as nothing more than Brittany's backup plan. I heard it, she confirmed grimly. And so did your phone's recording app. That night after Zoe left, I sat on my balcony, staring at the Chicago skyline, processing what I had learned all my life. I had been working to earn love and approval. That was never going to be given. My parents had raised me not as a daughter to cherish, but as an insurance policy for their favorite child. The realization was devastating, but also strangely liberating. I no longer needed to try to win their approval or respect. I no longer needed to maintain the fiction of a loving family. The truth was laid bare, and while it hurt, it also freed me to do what I had never dared before: fight back with everything I had. The next morning, I called Eleanor. I do not just want to defend against their lawsuit. I told her I want to countersue for harassment. Emotional distress, identity theft, the fraudulent loans, all of it. I want to make sure they never try to use me again. Elena's voice was calm, but I could hear the approval in it. Now we are talking. Let me put together a plan. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. The worst had happened. My family had revealed their true feelings about me in the cruelest possible way. But in doing so, they had also released me from a lifetime of futile striving for their approval. Now, I could focus on protecting myself and building a life defined by my own values, not their expectations. The breaking point had come, and against all odds, I felt stronger for having reached it with Elena's guidance. I began systematically building my defense and countersuit. We met in her office on a Saturday morning. The glass conference room table, soon covered with documents, property records, bank statements, credit reports, and transcripts of conversations with my family. The first priority is shutting down their ridiculous lawsuit, Elena explained. That is the easy part. The countersuit will be more complex, but potentially more satisfying. We started with the property issue. I gathered all documentation relating to my apartment, purchased the mortgage application showing I was the sole applicant. Bank statements demonstrating the source of my down payment came exclusively from my savings, and maintenance fee payments made solely from my accounts. I even tracked down the contractor receipts for renovations, all paid by me, without any contribution from my parents. This establishes complete financial independence regarding the property, Elena noted. They cannot claim any interest in it. Next, we addressed the alleged verbal agreement. I had emails and text messages from the family dinner and subsequent conversations, clearly showing my consistent refusal to sell the apartment with no mention of any prior promise. Their claim hinges on a verbal agreement that never existed. Elena said in property matters, even if such an agreement had been made, which it was not, it would need to be in writing to be enforceable under the statute of frauds. The fraudulent student loans required more detailed investigation. Elena connected me with a financial forensic specialist named Marcus, who specialized in identity theft cases. He methodically traced the origin of the loans, identifying the initial applications, which contained forged signatures, and documenting how the funds were diverted from educational purposes. These loans total over $30,000, Marcus explained, showing me the paperwork with the interest you have been paying. They have cost you closer to $40,000 over the years. The number was staggering: $40,000 essentially stolen from me by my own parents, money that could have eased my college struggles or allowed me to buy my apartment sooner. While the legal team worked on the financial aspects, Zoe helped me document the harassment. We created a detailed timeline of all contact attempts: phone calls, texts, emails, social media messages, the workplace incident, and the attempted apartment entries. Security footage from my building and office provided visual evidence of their increasingly intrusive behavior. This pattern demonstrates a clear escalation, Elena noted. From emotional manipulation to attempted financial access to physical stalking, no judge is going to look kindly on this. As we built our case, I took steps to protect myself from further intrusion. I installed additional security cameras at my apartment, alerted my workplace security to prevent any family members from entering the building, and created new accounts with enhanced security measures to replace those my parents might have information about. Zoe regularly checked my apartment when I was at work, ensuring no one had attempted entry. Just as we were finalizing our strategy, I received an unexpected message. It was from Kevin Brittany's soon-to-be ex-husband asking to meet. After consulting with Elena, I agreed to see him at a public restaurant with security cameras. Kevin looked exhausted when he arrived, nothing like the confident businessman I remembered from the wedding. We ordered coffee and sat in uncomfortable silence until he finally spoke. "I want to apologize for what your family is putting you through. None of this is your responsibility. Thank you, I said, genuinely surprised. How did you find out about the lawsuit? Brittany's lawyer mentioned it during negotiations, suggested the proceeds from your apartment sale would factor into potential settlements. My lawyer was confused, to say the least. He hesitated, then slid a folder across the table. I thought you should have this. Copies of financial records and text messages from Brittany that might help your case. I opened the folder cautiously. Inside were bank statements showing large unexplained withdrawals from joint accounts, text messages between Brittany and her lover discussing how to hide their relationship, and most damning messages between Brittany and my parents, discussing how to pressure me into contributing to her divorce settlement. Why are you giving me this? I asked, genuinely confused. Kevin sighed. Because what they are doing is wrong. I loved Brittany despite everything, but I cannot stand by while your family tries to destroy you financially for her benefit. Especially when he hesitated. When what? When the financial issues in our marriage went far beyond the affair. Brittany has a gambling problem, a serious one. It started with online poker during the pandemic and escalated to casino trips while I was traveling for work. She lost over $100,000 in the last year alone. This revelation stunned me. My parents had presented Brittany's divorce as purely a matter of her needing better legal representation to fight the prenup. They had never mentioned gambling debts. Does my family know about this? I asked. They know they helped cover some of her losses before I discovered what was happening. That is part of why they are so desperate for money now. They're financially extended from bailing her out repeatedly. This information changed everything. My family was not just trying to help Brittany through a divorce. They were attempting to use me to solve a much larger financial crisis of her making. Armed with this new knowledge, I returned to Elena with Kevin's documents. She reviewed them carefully, her expression growing increasingly satisfied. This is extremely helpful, she confirmed. It establishes a pattern of financial irresponsibility and collusion that directly contradicts their court filings. Kevin should be prepared to provide sworn testimony if necessary, with all elements in place. Elena filed our response to my parents' lawsuit, along with our countersuit. The countersuit alleged harassment, intent, infliction of emotional distress, identity theft regarding the fraudulent student loans, invasion of privacy for the use of my diaries, and trespass for the apartment incidents. We requested damages for the fraudulent loans interest paid and emotional suffering, as well as an injunction preventing any family member from contacting me at home or work. What happens now? I asked after everything was filed. Now we wait for their response, Elena explained. But based on the strength of our evidence, I expect they will quickly realize they are in an untenable position. Their lawyer, assuming they have a competent one, will advise them to drop their suit and attempt to settle ours. The waiting period was difficult. I threw myself into work, grateful for Gregory's continued support and understanding. He arranged for me to temporary work on projects requiring less client interaction, allowing me to focus on rebuilding my professional confidence. After Brittany's office scene, Zoe remained my emotional anchor, checking in daily and providing perspective when anxiety threatened to overwhelm me. Remember, she would remind me, you are not just defending yourself now. You are establishing that you cannot be manipulated or used. This is about your future, not just your apartment. 2 weeks after filing, we received the response from my parents' attorney. As Elena had predicted, they were withdrawing their lawsuit against me. However, they were also contesting our countersuit, claiming all actions were taken out of parental concern and denying knowledge of the fraudulent loans. Despite clear evidence to the contrary, this is actually good news. Elena assured me their position is weak and they know it. They are just posturing before eventually offering to settle. Sure enough, 3 days later, their attorney contacted Elena Omnia with a settlement offer. They would drop all claims regarding my apartment, issue a formal apology for the misunderstanding, and pay a nominal sum toward the fraudulent loans. If I would drop my countersuit. This is insulting, I said. When Elena presented the offer, they committed fraud and harassment, and they think a token payment and insincere apology resolves that. I agree, Elena replied. We will counter with terms that actually address the severity of their actions. Our counteroffer was firm full repayment of all fraudulent loan amounts, plus interest payment for therapy costs resulting from emotional distress. A legally binding agreement to cease all contact unless explicitly initiated by me, and a 288 formal admission of wrongdoing regarding both the loans and harassment. My parents rejected our terms, seemingly confident that family ties would ultimately lead me to accept a lesser settlement. They mentally misunderstood how completely their actions had severed those ties. With settlement negotiations stalled, we proceeded toward court hearings with a quiet confidence born of overwhelming evidence and legal merit. As the court date approached, I found myself surprisingly calm. The apartment that had been the center of this conflict became my sanctuary. Each evening, I would walk through the rooms, touching the walls I had painted, the countertops I had saved, for reminding myself what I was fighting for. Not just property, but the right to determine my own life without exploitation by those who should have protected me. The battle lines were drawn. The strategy was in place. Now it was time to face my family in court and finally stand up for myself without compromise or apology. The morning of the court hearing arrived with a strange sense of inevitability. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, attempting to project the competence and stability I knew would serve me well before a judge. Elena met me outside the courthouse, projecting confidence that helped steady my nerves. "Remember," she said as we climbed the steps, "you have truth and evidence on your side. They have neither." The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined from television dramas, more intimate and therefore more intimidating. My parents and Brittany sat on the opposite side with their attorney, a harried-looking man with a worn briefcase, who appeared to be reviewing documents at the last minute. None of them would meet my eyes. Judge Harriet Wilson entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. After preliminary introductions, she reviewed the competing filings and looked up with barely concealed exasperation. "Before we proceed further, I want to be clear about what we are dealing with here," she said. "The original suit claiming a verbal agreement to sell property has been withdrawn. What remains is a countersuit alleging harassment, emotional distress, identity theft, invasion of privacy, and trespassing. Is that correct?" Both attorneys confirmed this assessment. "Very well," Judge Wilson continued. "Let us address these allegations systematically." The proceedings that followed were both grueling and surreal. Elena presented our evidence methodically, the documentation of fraudulent loans, the recorded phone conversation where my parents admitted viewing me as Brittany's safety net security footage of their attempted apartment entry, the 4-day time and workplace incident, and the pattern of escalating harassment. Throughout Elena's presentation, I kept my expression neutral, though it was difficult watching my parents shift uncomfortably as each new piece of evidence was introduced. Brittany alternated between looking defiant and tearful, especially when Kevin's documentation about her gambling was presented. When it was their attorney's turn to respond, the weakness of their position became painfully apparent. He attempted to frame their actions as motivated by concern for family welfare, suggesting that the loans had been taken out with my verbal consent, contradicted by documentation showing I was not even present when they were initiated, and that their attempts to enter my apartment were out of worry for my mental health, contradicted by their own messages discussing inventorying my possessions. Judge Wilson interrupted their attorney, repeatedly asking pointed questions that exposed the logical inconsistencies in their defense. "Are you suggesting," she asked at one point, "that taking out loans in someone else's name without their knowledge or consent is an expression of parental love?" The attorney stumbled through an unconvincing response about different family dynamics that made Judge Wilson's eyebrows rise nearly to her hairline. The turning point came when my father was called to testify. Under Elena's skilled questioning, his careful facade began to crumble. When pressed about the recorded phone call, where he admitted they had always intended for me to be Brittany's safety net, he attempted to justify rather than deny. "Families have different roles," he insisted. "Valerie was always more capable, more independent. Brittany needs more support. There is nothing wrong with expecting family members to help each other according to their abilities." "Did you ever help Valerie according to your ability?" Elena asked. "We raised her, put a roof over her head. Did you pay for her college education, as you did for Brittany?" "No. But did you contribute to her apartment purchase or renovations?" "No, but that is not relevant." "It seems extremely relevant to the current situation," Elena countered. "You are asking the court to believe that family members should help each other. Yet you have consistently failed to help your older daughter while demanding she sacrifice for your younger daughter. My father's face reddened. Brittany needed the help more because she refuses to face consequences for her actions, Elena suggested, like the gambling debts that precipitated this divorce crisis. At the mention of gambling, Brittany suddenly stood up. "This is all so unfair," she cried. "Everyone always takes Val's side. She thinks she is so perfect with her fancy job in her apartment. She has always been jealous of me." "Miss Edwards, please control your client," Judge Wilson directed their attorney sharply. Instead of sitting down, Brittany continued her outburst. "You do not understand what it is like to be me. Everyone expects so much, and when I make one little mistake, gambling away $100,000 and having an affair are not little mistakes," I said quietly, speaking for the first time. "Shut up," Brittany shouted. "You have no idea what pressure I am under. Mom and Dad always expected me to be special, to be extraordinary. You got to be boring and responsible. But I had to shine." Her unexpected confession silenced the courtroom. My parents looked mortified, their attorney defeated. Judge Wilson called for a brief recess, during which Elena squeezed my arm. "That outburst just won your case," she whispered. When court resumed, Judge Wilson delivered her ruling with brisk efficiency. She dismissed all remaining objections to my countersuit, finding in my favor on all counts. My parents were ordered to repay the full amount of the fraudulent loans, plus interest, cover my legal fees, and pay damages for emotional distress. Additionally, a restraining order was issued preventing any of them from contacting me at home or work without prior written permission. Furthermore, Judge Wilson added, "I am referring the student loan matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges, as identity theft and fraud are serious offenses. Whether they choose to pursue those charges will be at their discretion, but I strongly encourage you." She looked directly at my parents to make full restitution immediately as a show of good faith. The impact of her words was immediate. My mother began to cry quietly while my father sat in stunned silence. Brittany stared at the floor, all her previous fire extinguished as we left the courthouse. My parents attempted to approach me. Elena stepped between us, reminding them of the freshly issued restraining order. My father's face hardened. "This is not what family does," he said over her shoulder. "No," I agreed. "Family does not steal from their children or try to take their home. Family does not harass or stalk or sue. What I did today was protect myself from people who have repeatedly proven they do not have my best interests at heart." "You will regret this," my mother said tearfully. "Someday you will need us." "I have needed you my entire life," I replied. "And you have consistently chosen Brittany. Now I am choosing myself." With that, Elena guided me away. We did not look back. News of the court outcome spread quickly through the extended family. The reactions were mixed. Some relatives who had only heard my parents' version of events were shocked by the revelations of fraud and harassment. Others, who had witnessed the favoritism toward Brittany throughout our childhood, privately reached out to express support for my stance. Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, who had always been slightly more perceptive than the rest of the family, sent a brief email. "I always saw how they treated you. I should have said something. I am sorry." The financial consequences for my parents were significant. In addition to the loan repayment and damages, they faced substantial legal fees and the looming possibility of criminal charges. Within weeks, they put their house up for sale, downsizing to a condo to meet their court-ordered obligations. Brittany suddenly, without her usual safety net, was forced to find employment for the first time in years. According to mutual acquaintance, she took a job as a retail associate and moved into a modest apartment after accepting a much smaller divorce settlement than she had initially demanded. As for me, the victory felt hollow at first. I had won, but at the cost of any remaining relationship with my birth family. Yet as weeks passed, I began to recognize the freedom that came with this loss. No more walking on eggshells. No more diminishing my achievements to avoid making Brittany feel bad. No more constant expectation that I would sacrifice for others while receiving nothing in return. For the first time in my life, I could focus on building relationships that were reciprocal and healthy with people who valued me for myself, rather than what I could do for them. 3 months after the court hearing, I received an unexpected letter from my father. Elena reviewed it first to ensure it did not violate the restraining order, then passed it along with a warning to consider carefully whether I wanted to read it. The letter was brief and predictable. a mixture of justification, subtle blame, and an appeal to family bonds. Despite everything he wrote, we are still your parents. Someday you might reconsider and allow us back into your life. I did not respond. Some bridges once burned should not be rebuilt. 6 months after the court case, my life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The apartment that had been the center of such conflict now truly felt like a sanctuary. I had repainted several rooms, replaced furniture associated with family visits, and created a space that reflected my personality without any consideration for my parents' or Brittany's opinions. Working with Dr. Lena Phillips, a therapist specializing in family trauma, I began the difficult process of unpacking a lifetime of emotional neglect and conditional love. Our weekly sessions often left me drained, but with increasing clarity about patterns I had never fully recognized before. You were parented from a very young age, Dr. Phillips explained, during one session, expected to be the responsible one, the mature one, while simultaneously being denied the recognition and support that should have accompanied that role. I just thought that was normal. I admitted being the older sister. There is a difference between age-appropriate responsibility and what was placed on you. You were expected to be an adult when you were still a child yourself. While Brittany was allowed to remain childlike well into adulthood, these insights helped me understand why the apartment had become such a flashpoint. It represented not just financial security, but a symbolic declaration of my right to prioritize my own needs, after a lifetime of being expected to sacrifice for others. As I worked through these realizations, I also began to build what Dr. Phillips called my chosen family. Zoe had always been a cornerstone of this group, but now I expanded my circle. Reconnecting with college friends I had lost touch with during years of overwork, and meeting new people through classes and interest groups, I finally had the emotional energy to join. We gathered for Sunday brunches, movie nights, and occasional weekend trips, creating traditions that replaced the obligatory and often tense family gatherings of my past. These relationships were based on mutual respect and genuine affection, not obligation or manipulation. For the first time, I understood what healthy connections felt like. Gregory continued to be a supportive presence at work, ensuring the family drama did not derail my career. Under his mentorship, I was promoted to senior analyst with a substantial raise that allowed me to accelerate payments on my remaining legitimate student loans. Financial freedom became a realistic goal rather than a distant dream. You know, he told me after announcing my promotion, sometimes the hardest battles give us the clearest sense of our own strength. You have handled this past year with remarkable grace. Not always gracefully, I corrected, thinking of the tears and anger that had punctuated my journey. Grace is not about never falling apart, he replied. It is about how you put yourself back together. Around the 8-month mark, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Brittany sent through Elena to respect the restraining order. Unlike my parents' communications, which continued to arrive periodically despite my lack of response, Brittany's message was different. I know you probably hate me, she wrote. You have every right to. I have been thinking a lot about our childhood and how Mom and Dad treated us so differently. I always thought you had it better because you were independent and capable. I never realized how much pressure they put on you or how much they favored me. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I am getting help for my gambling and trying to take responsibility for my life for the first time. I hope someday we might talk again, but I understand if that never happens. I showed the email to Dr. Phillips during our next session. What do you think? She asked. Do you believe she is sincere? I am not sure, I admitted. Brittany has always been good at saying what people want to hear when she needs something. And what might she need from you now? I considered the question. Nothing obvious. She has a job and apartment. Our parents are still in her life, though they have less to give her now. Perhaps what she needs is not material. Dr. Phillips suggested the idea that Brittany might genuinely be doing her own emotional work was difficult to process for so long. She had been cast in my mind as the perpetual taker, the favored child who never had to grow up. The possibility that she too might be changing disrupted the narrative I had constructed. After careful consideration and consultation with both Dr. Phillips and Elena, I agreed to a limited email exchange with Brittany, maintaining clear boundaries while opening a small door to possible reconciliation. Our communications were tentative, at first focusing on neutral topics and current experiences rather than rehashing past grievances. Gradually, a different picture emerged of my sister without our parents' enabling presence. She was struggling, but also growing. The entitled princess was giving way to someone more grounded, more aware of her own patterns. While I maintained healthy skepticism, I also allowed for the possibility of genuine change. My parents were a different matter entirely. Their occasional messages continued to demonstrate a fundamental lack of understanding about what had transpired. They framed the entire legal battle as a regrettable family disagreement, rather than a consequence of their actions. They expressed no genuine remorse for the fraud or harassment, merely sadness about the current estrangement. Some people are incapable of the self-reflection required for true change, Dr. Phillips noted when I shared their latest communication. Maintaining distance in such cases is not punitive. It is protective. I took her words to heart, reinforcing my boundaries with my parents while cautiously nurturing the fragile new connection with Brittany. This selective approach to family relationships represented a significant step in my healing journey, allowing me to make conscious choices rather than automatically fulfilling expectations. A year after the court case, I hosted a small gathering in my apartment to mark both the anniversary and my continued recovery. Zoe Gregory and his wife, several friends from my new social circle, and even Elena attended. As we shared food and conversation in the home I had fought so hard to keep, I felt a profound sense of peace later that evening after most guests had departed. Zoe and I sat on my balcony watching the city lights. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, standing up to them so completely. I considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they could not be the parents I needed, but I do not regret protecting myself. For too long, I set myself on fire to keep them warm, especially Brittany. Learning to prioritize my own well-being was not selfish. It was survival. "You have changed," Zoe observed. "You stand taller now because I am standing on solid ground." I replied, not constantly shifting to accommodate others. The lesson had been painful, but transformative. True family, whether biological or chosen, supports your growth, rather than exploiting your strength. Love does not demand that you diminish yourself or sacrifice your security. Healthy relationships are reciprocal, not parasitic. My apartment remained more than just real estate. It represented a declaration of independence, a physical manifestation of my right to create boundaries and define my own life. Each room held memories of both the struggle to keep it and the peace that followed, a daily reminder of my journey from accommodating daughter to self-respect. Adult. As Zoe left that night, she hugged me tightly. "I am proud of you, Val. Not just for winning the battle, but for how you have handled the aftermath." Her words echoed in my mind as I prepared for bed. The aftermath had indeed been as challenging as the battle itself, requiring me to reconstruct my understanding of family love and my own worth. Yet through that reconstruction, I had created something stronger and more authentic than what had existed before. The apartment was quiet as I moved through my nighttime routine, but it was a peaceful quiet, not the tense silence of my childhood home. Here I was free to be fully myself without apology or justification. Here I had taken a stand that changed not just my relationship with my family, but my relationship with myself. That perhaps was the most profound lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest act of love is the one you extend to yourself, setting boundaries that protect your spirit and create space for genuine joy. In defending my home, I had ultimately found my way home to myself. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? Or have you experienced being the responsible one while others got away with anything? Share your experiences in the family members' comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share with anyone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not just okay. It is sometimes necessary for your well-being. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve to prioritize your own happiness too.